The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong follows the mother of a prominent family with ancient warrior traditions as she struggles to leave her past behind and connect with her family in the present. When war comes to their shore, Misaki must face her problems or lose everything. That summary was hard for me to come up with because it feels oversimplified. I found that even the best stories can usually be distilled into a single simple sentence. For example, the Witcher series is about a monster hunter searching for and protecting his adopted daughter. It's simple and it's perfect, but simplifying the Sword of Kaigen into a sentence feels like a disservice. In many ways, the Sword of Kaigen is unlike anything else in the fantasy genre, especially mainstream epic fantasy. Fantasy novels have for a long time been a repeat of the same tropes and same perspectives. It's insane how many fantasy stories are about a young bachelor on some kind of magical quest to save the world. While many stories are starting to break this pattern, the Sword of Kaigen stands out above the rest because of the perspective it follows. So let's dig a little deeper. There are two different point of view characters, Misaki and her oldest son Mamoru. In the beginning, I preferred Mamoru's point of view. He becomes friends with someone who lives outside their traditional warrior society and starts learning that maybe the way that he was taught to believe and see the world isn't quite accurate. His point of view is juxtaposed against his mother's, who feels oppressed and alone in her current life. It took me some time to connect with Misaki, and this is my first criticism of the novel. Misaki's first point of view scene was a conversation with other women split up by Misaki reviewing her relationships with each of the other women, but in her head. The split nature of the conversation made it hard to follow, and because instead of focusing on Misaki, the scene focused on the other women, I struggled to get into Misaki's skin. In addition, many of her early point of views were flashbacks, and while they served to develop her character, I struggled with them at first because I wasn't connected with her in the present. That changed probably about a third of the way through the novel, and this book came alive. It's rare that a fantasy novel takes the perspective of a mother. We see her at first internally and then later externally grappling with her duty to raise her children and trying to connect with her family, all the while feeling extremely oppressed. The fantasy genre can often feel like a rainbow full of different shades of red, but Sword of Kaigen brings out a vibrant shade of blue. It's these types of books that take me out of my perspective and show me a different way of being that really call to me. Let's talk about the setting. It's next to impossible to find fantasy novels that take place in a modern setting, but not in our world. So, quote unquote, urban fantasy, but in another world. I can count the number of books I've read with that kind of setting on my hand, and I've been looking. So The City of Stairs, video out soon, subscribe so you don't miss it. The Greenbone Saga, Yumi the Nightmare Painter, now The Sword of Kaigen, and soon my own novel, The Fourth Wall. See what I did there? Sign up for my newsletter in the description to get updated on major updates for my novel. I love that The Sword of Kaigen takes place in such a setting. However, I was a little disappointed because the specific village or city the story takes place in has village vibes, and they're separated from society and not current with a lot of technology. Only a little disappointed. Would I want to live here? That's the important question. I think it could be cool for a short period of time, maybe for a study abroad or something, but I don't know if I'd want to live there long term. You see, there's a difference between living in a fantasy setting without modern technology and a fantasy setting that could have modern technology, but is just behind the times in their own world. I'd vacation there though, for sure. Let's talk characters. The main, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 characters were strong, but I found the background characters lacking. I'm going to bring up that opening scene with the women having a conversation again because that scene served as a foundation for a large handful of the background characters. While Misaki was telling us one of the other women's stories, I got confused and thought she was telling us her own story. I struggled in that scene to keep track of all the women and who had which personality and which passed and who was married to who. So I spent the rest of the book undoing my confusion. Luckily, these women were, like I said, in the background, with only one or two having a real prominent role, so it didn't hinder my enjoyment of the book too much. Now it's time to play Kiss, Marry, Kill. I would kiss the woman who grew up in a fisherman's home. She just seemed really down to earth and open and confident in her skin, despite the fact that she could easily feel like a fish out of water among the circle of elite warrior families. I would marry the foreigner kid who just moved into town. I really vibed with his personality, and I really liked that he worked to support the village in crisis, even though he was kind of an outsider. Kill is hard because at the beginning of the novel, I would have killed both Misaki's old love interest from her flashbacks and her husband. But now that I've read the whole book, I don't think I'd kill either of them. And there aren't really any prominent villains. Oh, I'd kill the government reps that show up to help the village. They were the worst. I loved Sword of Kaigen. Its unique perspective and focus is refreshing in a genre that can often feel like a jumble of repeated tropes and motifs. If Sword of Kaigen sounds like your vibe, I think you'll also enjoy the Greenbone Saga. Click the card to check it out.